Welcome to Stories Mystics. Hello, dear listener. You've just stepped into a world where stories are not only heard, but deeply felt. Here, every word holds a secret, every tale is a journey, and every character pulls you into their magical universe. Ne lâchez. Don't forget to hit subscribe and become a part of our Stories Mystics family, where every night is a new adventure waiting for you. Now close your eyes, breathe deeply, and allow yourself to drift into this world of cozy mystery and quiet delight. And let's begin tonight's journey.
A tycoon slumps dead, his pockets stuffed with rye. His wife chokes on poisoned tea. A maid is strangled, a clothespin cruelly pinned to her nose. Each death echoes a chilling nursery rhyme. Sing a song of sixpence. Miss Marple, the unassuming sleuth, uncovers a tangle of greed, betrayal, and buried vendettas. Is the killer the charming rogue's son, the debt-ridden heir, or a shadow from the past? Who's orchestrating this deadly verse, and who's next? Unravel the suspense before the rhyme's final note.
Chapter 1. The Rye in the Pocket. The Fortescue estate loomed like a forgotten relic on the outskirts of Baden Heath, its Victorian spires piercing the autumn fog that clung to the English countryside. Yew Tree Lodge, as it was pompously named, was a sprawling mansion of red brick and leaded windows, surrounded by manicured gardens that whispered of old money and older grudges. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of polished oak and simmering resentments, a place where fortunes were made in the shadows of boardrooms and lost in the echoes of family feuds. Rex Fortescue, the patriarch, ruled this domain with the iron fist of a self-made tycoon. At 68, he was a barrel-chested man with a ruddy face framed by silver hair, his eyes sharp as ledger entries. His empire spanned mining ventures in Africa and speculative deals in London, built on a foundation of ruthless ambition. That morning, as the first rays of sun filtered through the study's heavy curtains, Rex sat at his massive mahogany desk, barking orders into a telephone receiver that seemed dwarfed in his meaty hand. "Tell those fools in Johannesburg that if they don't deliver the consignment by month's end, I'll bury them in lawsuits deeper than their damned minds," he roared, slamming the phone down with such force that a stack of papers fluttered like startled birds. His secretary, Miss Griffith, a mousy woman in her 40s with wire-rimmed glasses, flinched from her corner desk, but said nothing. She was used to his tempests. Rex leaned back in his leather chair, rubbing his temples. A peculiar unease had settled over him lately, a nagging ache in his gut, dismissed as indigestion from too many rich lunches. He reached for his morning tea, a ritual brew strong enough to strip paint, and took a swig. The liquid burned going down, but he savored it, his mind already racing to the next deal. Outside, the gravel driveway crunched under the tires of an arriving car, but Rex paid no mind. Suddenly, his vision blurred. The room tilted like a ship in a storm. He clutched at his chest, fingers fumbling into his waistcoat pocket where he kept a lucky sovereign coin. But instead of the familiar metal, his hand emerged clutching a fistful of dry golden grains, rye, spilling onto the desk like confetti from a macabre party. "What the devil?" he muttered, his voice slurring as foam flecked his lips. Miss Griffith looked up just in time to see him convulse, his body arching backward before slumping forward onto the blotter. She screamed, a high-pitched wail that echoed through the halls, summoning the household like a siren's call. First to arrive was Adele Fortescue, Rex's second wife, a vision of contrived elegance in her silk dressing gown. At 35, she was half his age, with platinum blonde hair cascading in waves and eyes the color of polished emeralds. Eyes that now widened in theatrical horror. "Rex, oh my darling!" she cried, rushing to his side and pressing a manicured hand to his neck. No pulse. She stepped back, her face paling beneath the rouge, as if calculating the implications mid-grief. Percival Fortescue, the elder son, burst in next, his thin frame clad in a tailored suit that hung on him like a shroud. A banker by trade, Percival was the epitome of dutiful restraint, sandy hair neatly parted, spectacles perched on a beak-like nose. He froze in the doorway, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Father? Good God, what's happened?" He knelt beside the body, avoiding the scattered rye grains as if they were venomous. From the servants' quarters came a flurry. The butler, Crump, with his perpetual scowl, the cook, Mrs. Crump, wiping flour from her hands, and the young housemaid Gladys Martin, her eyes wide with fright. They hovered at the threshold, murmuring in hushed tones about omens and ill winds. Lance Fortescue, the prodigal younger son, was the last to appear, sauntering in with the casual air of someone who just returned from a decade abroad. Tall and tanned from African suns, with a rakish mustache and a devil-may-care grin. He'd arrived unannounced the previous evening, suitcase in hand, and stories of diamond hunts on his lips. "What's all the fuss?" he drawled, leaning against the doorframe. His eyes flicked to the desk, noting the rye with a curious tilt of his head. "Looks like the old man's been playing farmer. Anyone call the doctor?" Adele shot him a venomous glance. "This is no time for your flippancy, Lance. Your father is dead." "Is he now? Well, that's a pity. I'd hoped for a proper reunion." The doctor arrived within an hour, a local practitioner named Haydock, who confirmed what everyone suspected. Poisoning. "Taxin, I'd wager," muttered, examining the teacup. "From yew-berries, perhaps. Deadly stuff. And those rye grains. Odd. Very odd." Word spread like wildfire, and by midday, Inspector Neal of the CID had descended upon Yew Tree Lodge. A wiry man in his 50s with a mustache like a broom bristle and eyes that missed nothing. He moved with the precision of a chess master. He sealed the study, his assistants dusting for prints and bagging the rye as evidence.
"Tell me about this morning," Neal said to Miss Griffith in the drawing-room, his notebook poised. The room was a cavern of velvet sofas and crystal decanters, the fireplace crackling against the chill. She twisted a handkerchief in her lap. Mr. Fortescue was in fine form, shouting down the phone as usual. Then he drank his tea and collapsed. Those grains in his pocket. I've no idea where they came from. He wasn't the type to carry birdseed. Neal nodded, turning to Adele, who lounged on a chaise with a cigarette holder dangling from her fingers. "Mrs. Fortescue? Any enemies your husband might have had? Business rivals, perhaps?" Adele exhaled a plume of smoke, her voice a sultry purr. "Rex was a shark in a sea of minnows, Inspector. Enemies, plenty. But who'd dare strike here, in our home?" Her eyes darted to Percival, who paced by the window. Percival cleared his throat. "Father's dealings were aggressive. There was that merger with Blackbird Mines last year. Some investors lost fortunes. But poison? It's barbaric." Lance, nursing a brandy despite the hour, chuckled from the armchair. "Barbaric? Sounds like something out of those old nursery rhymes Father used to recite when he was in his cups. Sing a song of sixpence, a pocketful of rye. Remember, Percy? He'd laugh about baking blackbirds in pies." Percival stiffened. "That's hardly relevant, Lance. And where were you this morning anyway? Skulking about the grounds?" "Jet lag, brother dear. I was catching up on sleep in the guest wing. Ask the maid. She brought me breakfast in bed." Lance winked at Gladys, who blushed and scurried out. Neil jotted notes, sensing the undercurrents. The family was a powder keg, Adele's youth clashing with Percival's propriety, Lance's charm masking opportunism. He interviewed the staff next, learning of petty thefts in the pantry and hushed arguments behind closed doors. Meanwhile, in the quiet village of St. Mary Mead, some miles away, Miss Jane Marple sat in her cottage garden, pruning roses with the delicacy of a surgeon. At 70-something, she was a slip of a woman with fluffy white hair, china blue eyes, and a mind sharper than her shears. News traveled fast in these parts, especially when it involved distant relatives. Her nephew, Raymond West, had telephoned earlier. "Aunt Jane, dreadful business at the Fortescues. Rex poisoned, they say. You remember, my wife Joan's cousin is married to Percival. Thought you might want to know." Miss Marple twinkled. "How tragic. And with that prodigal son returning. Reminds me of young Tommy Pierce back in 32, always poking his nose where it didn't belong. Do keep me informed, dear." But Miss Marple was not one to sit idle. By afternoon, she had arranged a casual visit to Yew Tree Lodge, ostensibly to offer condolences to Joan's cousin, Elaine Fortescue, Percival's wife, an overlooked figure in the drama. Elaine was a plain woman with mousy hair and a nervous tic, often eclipsed by Adele's glamour. As Miss Marple's taxi crunched up the drive, she observed the estate with keen interest. "Such a grand place," she murmured to the driver. "But grandeur often hides the rot within." Elaine greeted her at the door, her eyes red-rimmed. "Miss Marple, how kind of you to come. It's all so awful. Rex gone, and the police everywhere." They settled in the conservatory, amid potted ferns and wicker chairs, with tea served by a trembling Gladys. Miss Marple sipped delicately, her ears attuned to every nuance. "Tell me about the family, my dear. I understand there's been some excitement with Lance's return." Elaine hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. "Lance? He's a charmer, but Percival says he's after the inheritance. Rex cut him off years ago after some scandal in Kenya, something about forged checks. And Adele, well, she's not one for mourning quietly. I overheard her on the phone this morning laughing with some man about finally being free." Miss Marple nodded, filing it away. "And the rye grains, most peculiar." Elaine shuddered. "Like that old rhyme. Rex used to hum it when tallying profits. 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie. Gives me chills." As they chatted, Miss Marple's gaze wandered to the garden, where Inspector Neal was questioning Crump the butler. She noted the yew hedges bordering the lawn. Source of taxane, perhaps? A subtle clue, but one that fit. Later, wandering the halls under pretense of fresh air, Miss Marple overheard a snippet in the library. Percival and Lance, voices low and heated. "You think you can waltz back after 10 years and claim what's mine?" Percival hissed. Lance's laugh was mocking. "Yours? Father always said you were the steady one, Percy, as steady as a tortoise. But tortoises don't win races without a hare to trip over." "Enough games. What did you really come back for?" "Family, of course, and maybe a slice of the pie." Miss Marple slipped away, her mind whirring. The rye wasn't coincidence. It was a taunt, a signature. By evening, the household gathered for dinner in the dining room, a somber affair under the chandelier's glow. Silver clinked against china, but conversation was sparse. Adele picked at her salad, her diamonds catching the light. Percival stared into his wineglass, lost in thought. Lance regaled Elaine with tales of safari adventures, his voice a counterpoint to the tension. Inspector Neal had departed for the day, promising more questions tomorrow. "No one leaves the estate," he'd warned. Miss Marple, invited to stay by a grateful Elaine, sat quietly at the table's end, observing. She noticed Adele's furtive glance at Lance, Percival's clenched jaw, and Gladys's shaky hands as she served the soup. As dessert arrived, poached pears in syrup,
The room fell into an uneasy calm. The initial shock had ebbed, replaced by a watchful vigilance. Whispers of motives hung in the air like smoke. Debts, affairs, vendettas. Miss Marple retired to her guest room, knitting by the fire. In her mind, the puzzle took shape, the rye as the first verse, hinting at more to come. "People are so like those in my village," she mused aloud. "Greed dressed in finery, secrets blooming like weeds." Outside, the fog thickened, shrouding Yew Tree Lodge in mystery. The stage was set for the next act, but for now, the curtain fell on a fragile piece, the family bound by suspicion and the shadow of a rhyme.
Chapter 2. The Blackbirds at Tea. The morning after Rex Fortescue's grim demise dawned crisp and clear over Yew Tree Lodge, the fog lifting to reveal dew-kissed lawns that sparkled like scattered jewels. Yet inside the mansion, the atmosphere remained heavy, laced with the acrid tang of suspicion and the faint, lingering odor of police chalk outlines in the study. The household stirred uneasily, each member navigating the new reality of loss and scrutiny with varying degrees of grace or lack thereof. Inspector Neal returned promptly at 9, his briefcase bulging with preliminary reports from the lab. He set up camp in the morning room, a sunlit space filled with chintz armchairs and shelves of dusty tomes on finance and fox hunting. His first order of business was to grill the sons separately, hoping to crack the facade of fraternal unity that had barely held through dinner the night before. Percival was summoned first. He entered with the stiff gait of a man accustomed to balance sheets rather than interrogations, adjusting his tie as if it were a noose. "Inspector, I trust you've made progress," he said, seating himself opposite Neal at the polished table. Neal flipped open his notebook, his expression neutral. "Progress is incremental, Mr. Fortescue. Let's discuss your father's business. Word is the firm was teetering. Overextended loans, shaky investments. You handle the books. Any irregularities?" "Irregularities? Nonsense. Father was aggressive, yes, but we were solvent. A few bad deals in uranium futures, perhaps, but nothing fatal." His eyes shifted to the window, where gardeners clipped hedges with mechanical precision. "And your relationship with him?" Neal pressed. "Strained, I've heard. Arguments over control?" A flush crept up Percival's neck. "Every family has tiffs. He favored bold moves. I prefer caution. But murder? Absurd. I was in my office all morning yesterday. Witnesses aplenty." Neal noted the alibi, sensing the man's defensiveness like a shield raised too high. "Very well. Send in your brother." Lance sauntered in moments later, exuding the easy confidence of a gambler with an ace up his sleeve. He dropped into the chair with a flourish, lighting a cigarette without asking. "Fire away, Inspector, though I warn you, my life's an open book, dog-eared and full of plot twists." Neal eyed the smoke curling upward. "Your return timing is convenient, Mr. Fortescue. Cut off from the will, then father dies. Motive?" "Motive? I've scraped by on wits and whimsy for years. Africa's full of opportunities. Gold rushes, ivory trades. I came back for nostalgia, not necromancy." He leaned forward, eyes twinkling. "But if we're pointing fingers, ask about Adele's little dalliances. Father's trophy wife had a wandering eye." Neal's pen paused. "Evidence? Just rumors from the club circuit. And Percival's been borrowing against the estate, quietly, mind you. Debts mounting like unpaid bar tabs." The inspector dismissed him with a nod, pondering the brothers' mutual accusations. Sibling rivalry or smokescreen? He stepped out for air only to find Miss Marple in the hallway, ostensibly admiring a vase of wilting lilies. "Good morning, Inspector," she said, her voice mild as milk. "Such a trying time for everyone. I've been chatting with young Gladys, the housemaid, you know. So observant, these girls." Neal raised an eyebrow. "Miss Marple? You're still here?" "Oh, yes. Elaine insisted, and one does like to help where one can. She adjusted her spectacles, her blue eyes piercing. Gladys mentioned something curious, overheard whispers of blackmail. Seems Rex had a habit of collecting debts, not just financial ones. Intrigued, despite himself, he followed her lead. They found Gladys in the scullery, polishing silver with vigorous strokes that betrayed her nerves. She was a slight girl of 20, with freckles dusting her nose and hair tied back in a sensible bun. "Gladys," Miss Marple began gently, "tell the inspector about those letters you saw Adele burning last week."
The maid glanced around, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "It was late, miss. I was tidying the drawing-room when Mrs. Fortescue came in, all flustered. She tossed a bundle into the fire. Envelopes with foreign stamps, from Paris or some such, smelled like perfume when they burned. And she muttered, 'No more payments, you leech!' Neely leaned in. 'Did you see the sender?' 'No, sir, but Mr. Rex had a row with her about it days before, called her a foolish spendthrift with secrets.' Miss Marple nodded sagely. 'Blackmail, perhaps, tied to Rex's dealings abroad. He did have those mining partners in Tangiers, shady types from what I gather.' Thanking Gladys, they left her to her tasks. Neely rubbed his chin. 'Useful, Miss Marple, but how do you know about Tangiers?' She smiled faintly. 'Village life teaches one to listen. My gardener's nephew worked on a Fortescue ship once, tales of smuggling and double crosses.' As midday approached, the household converged on the terrace for an impromptu luncheon, orchestrated by Adele to lift spirits. The table was set with crisp linens, silver platters of cold meats, and a towering fruit salad. Sunlight dappled the scene, belying the undercurrent of dread. Adele presided like a queen, her silk blouse shimmering as she poured lemonade with a steady hand. 'We mustn't let this tragedy consume us,' she declared, her tone bright but brittle. 'Rex would want us carrying on.' Percival grunted agreement, spearing a slice of ham. Lance, ever the provocateur, raised his glass. 'To father, may his secrets rest easier than he did.' Elaine, seated beside Miss Marple, fidgeted with her napkin. 'Lance, that's tasteless.' Miss Marple observed quietly, noting Adele's subtle flinch at the word secrets. As conversation turned to mundane matters, weather, upcoming hunts, a footman arrived with a telegram for Percival. He read it, his face draining of color. 'Bad news?' Adele inquired, her curiosity veiled as concern. 'From the solicitors. Father's will reading is set for tomorrow. Complications with the codicil.' Percival folded the paper hastily. Lance's eyes narrowed. 'Complications? Do tell, brother.' Before Percival could respond, afternoon tea was announced, shifting the gathering indoors to the parlor. The room was cozy, with plush sautés arranged around a low table laden with scones, cucumber sandwiches, and a towering pot of Earl Grey. A delicate china service gleamed under the chandelier, each cup adorned with gold rims. Adele took charge of pouring, her movements graceful. 'Milk first, Elaine, and you, Miss Marple. Sugar?' 'One lump, dear,' Miss Marple replied, accepting her cup with thanks. She sipped appreciatively, her senses alert. The group settled into light chatter, Elaine on her charity work, Percival murmuring about market fluctuations. Lance entertained with a yarn about outwitting a crocodile in the Zambezi, his gestures animated. Suddenly, Adele set down her cup with a clatter, her hand flying to her throat. 'This tea! Bitter!' she gasped, her face contorting. Foam bubbled at her lips as she convulsed, toppling sideways onto the carpet in a heap of silk and pearls. Chaos erupted. Elaine screamed, knocking over a vase. Percival leapt to his feet, yelling for the doctor. Lance knelt beside Adele, checking for breath. None. Miss Marple, calm amid the storm, noted the acrid almond scent wafting from the fallen cup. Cyanide. Inspector Neely, alerted by the collation, burst in. "Nobody touch anything." He scanned the room, his gaze landing on the teapot. Poison again. Who poured? All eyes turned to the group. Adele had served herself last. As the body was covered and removed, Neely began questioning. Who prepared the tea? He demanded of Mrs. Crump in the kitchen. The cook, a stout woman with flour-dusted apron, wrung her hands. "I brewed it fresh, sir. Gladys carried the tray." Gladys, pale as parchment, nodded. "I set it down and left. No one tampered while I was there." Miss Marple, lingering nearby, spotted something overlooked. A tattered nursery rhyme book peeking from a sideboard drawer, its cover illustrated with birds in a pie. She pulled it out discreetly, flipping to "Sing a Song of Sixpence." The lines leapt out. 24 blackbirds baked in a pie. The king was in his counting-house. "Inspector," she called softly, showing him the page. "See here, the rye in the pocket, now blackbirds at tea. Adele's death mirrors the verse, someone staging a macabre play." Neely frowned, examining the book. An old family heirloom, but why? Perhaps a clue to the motive, Miss Marple suggested. Rex recited it often, per Lance, tied to a past grievance. Further probing revealed hidden affairs. Adele's Paris letters hinted at a lover demanding hush money linked to Rex's business rivals. Gladys confessed to seeing a shadowy figure near the kitchen earlier, a stranger in a tweed coat. Neely interrogated Lance again in the library, bookshelves looming like silent judges. "Your comment about Adele's dalliances, details." Lance shrugged. "Overheard her on a call to a chap named Dubois. French accent. Threats of exposure. Father knew, cut her allowance." "And your alibi for the tea?" Neely asked. "Chatting with Elaine on the terrace. She'll vouch." Elaine confirmed it, but her hesitation raised flags. Percival, meanwhile, admitted financial woes. "The firm's in arrears. Father's wild schemes left us exposed. But I'd never." A breakthrough came when Neely checked the cyanide source, traced to the garden shed, used for pest control. Fingerprints implicated Crump the butler, who had access. Confronted in the servants' hall, Crump blustered. "Fingerprints? I handled the shed daily, but I was in the cellar during tea, inventorying wines." Witnesses corroborated. The gardener saw him there. Cleared, Crump slumped in relief. With the false lead dismissed, tensions eased momentarily. The household dispersed, whispers fading into evening shadows. Neely retired to her room, knitting by the window. The rhyme's next verse nagged. The queen in her parlour, eating bread and honey. More to come? She smiled knowingly, needles clicking like a countdown.
Chapter 3. The Maid's Silent Song. The evening following Adele's fatal tea had draped Yew Tree Lodge in a shroud of uneasy quiet, the kind that amplifies every creak of floorboards and rustle of leaves outside. Lanterns flickered along the pathways, casting elongated shadows that danced like conspirators in the wind. Inside, the family had retreated to their corners, Percival buried in ledgers in the billiard room, Lance nursing a whiskey in the smoking lounge, and Elaine pacing the upper halls with a book she wasn't reading. Inspector Neal had posted a constable at the gate, his presence a stern reminder that the estate was now a gilded cage. Miss Marple, ever the unobtrusive guest, had taken to the library, a vast chamber lined with leather-bound volumes and globes charting forgotten empires. She perused a shelf of antique poetry, her fingers tracing spines as her mind traced connections. The nursery rhyme book from the parlor sat open on a side table, its illustrated pages a grim road map, rye in the pocket, blackbirds in the pie, and now the looming verse about the maid in the garden, her nose pecked off by a bird. Such childish cruelty, yet so deliberate in its echo here. Dawn broke with a chorus of rooks cawing from the ancient oaks, heralding a day heavy with anticipation. Neil arrived early, his face etched with determination, accompanied by a forensic expert named Dr. Quimper, a bespectacled man with a penchant for obscure toxins. They convened in the conservatory, where glass walls framed the gardens like a living painting. "Autopsy confirms cyanide in Adele's system," Quimper announced, spreading reports across a wicker table. "Ingested via the tea, but the pot tested clean. Must have been in her cup alone. Precise work." Neil nodded, sipping coffee from a thermos. "Targeted, then. And the rhyme suggests pattern. Who's next? The maid?" Miss Marple, who had wandered in under pretense of fetching a shawl, overheard and interjected softly. "The maid hanging out the clothes, Inspector. But in this house maids don't hang laundry. Too grand for that. Perhaps a metaphor." Neil turned, surprised but appreciative. "Metaphor. This killer's literal so far. Rye grains, poisoned tea like blackbird bait. We'll watch the staff closely." As the morning unfolded, focus shifted to the servants' quarters, a warren of narrow corridors below stairs. Gladys Martin, still shaken from the previous day's horrors, bustled about her duties with forced cheer. She was dusting the silver in the pantry when Elaine entered, her face drawn. "Gladys, could you mend this hem?" Elaine held out a skirt, her voice trembling. "And have you heard anything odd? Whispers among the staff." Gladys set down her cloth, eyes darting. "Odd? Well, miss, Crump's been muttering about quitting, says the house is cursed, and I found this note slipped under my door last night." She produced a crumpled paper from her apron. Elaine unfolded it. "Keep silent or join the song," scrawled in block letters, unsigned. "This is chilling," Elaine whispered. "Show the inspector at once." Upstairs, Lance cornered Percival in the breakfast nook, a sun-drenched alcove overlooking the rose beds. The table bore remnants of toast and marmalade, but neither man ate. "Admit it, Percy, you're relieved Adele's gone," Lance said, his tone laced with accusation. "She was bleeding the estate dry with her extravagances." Percival's fork clattered. "Relieved? You're delusional. She was father's folly, but now the will's in play. If there's a codicil favoring her lover—" "Lover? Dubois? I dug into him last night, wired a contact in Paris. Turns out he's a con artist, bilked widows before. Adele was his latest mark." Percival's eyes widened. "And father knew. That explains the rows. But does it tie to the murders?" Before Lance could reply, a shout echoed from the gardens. They rushed out to find Mrs. Crump, the cook, pointing hysterically at the herb patch. There, amid thyme and rosemary, lay a small vial, empty, labeled cyanide for vermin. Neil arrived swiftly, gloving up to examine it. Freshly discarded, someone's getting sloppy. Miss Marple, joining the group with her gardening gloves as alibi, knelt nearby. "Look here, footprints in the mulch, small, like a woman's shoe, and that sprig of parsley clutched in the soil, as if dropped in haste." Quimper tested the vial residue. Cyanide traces, matches Adele's poison. Suspicion rippled through the household. Neil questioned Elaine in the drawing room, velvet curtains drawn against the prying sun. "You were close to Adele. Any confidences about threats?" he asked. Elaine twisted her wedding ring. "She mentioned a stalker once, a jilted admirer from her theater days.
Sent her blackbird feathers as warnings. I thought it fanciful. Blackbirds? Neil's interest piqued. Details? A man named Vivian, stage manager she spurned, vanished years ago, but perhaps resurfaced. Meanwhile, Gladys ventured into the attic to fetch linens, the space a labyrinth of trunks and cobwebs. Dust motes swirled in beams from a skylight as she rummaged. A floorboard creaked behind her. She whirled, but saw nothing. Then a whisper, silent song.
Heart-pounding, she fled downstairs, colliding with Crump in the hall. "Someone's up there," she gasped. Crump, gruff but protective, grabbed a poker and ascended. He returned empty-handed. "Just rats, girl. Your nerves are shot." But Gladys wasn't convinced. She confided in Miss Marple later, over cocoa in the kitchen. "It felt real, miss, like the rhyme's coming for me." Miss Marple patted her hand. "Fear makes phantoms, but let's unravel this. Tell me about your past. Any ties to the Fortescues?" Gladys blushed. "Well, I worked for Rex's sister once, years back. She died sudden, like from a fall. Rumors of push, but nothing proven." Miss Marple's eyes sharpened. "And the rhyme? Familiar?" "Aye. She sang it to her wards, called it a warning against nosiness." As luncheon approached, the family assembled in the dining hall, a grand space with tapestries depicting medieval feasts. Silver gleamed under chandeliers, but appetites were scant. Adele's empty chair loomed like an accusation. Percival broke the silence. "We must discuss the business. With father and Adele gone, shares plummet. I propose a merger with rivals. Stabilize things." Lance snorted. "Merger? You mean sellout? I've ideas from Africa. New ventures in rare earths." Elaine intervened. "Not now, please. The will reading's tomorrow. Let's wait." Tension simmered until Neil entered, holding a telegram. "News from Paris. Dubois alibied. Jailed for fraud last month. Not our killer." Relief washed over them, but short-lived. Afternoon brought a garden stroll for Miss Marple and Gladys, the paths winding through topiaries shaped like mythical beasts. "Show me where you walk daily," Miss Marple suggested. Gladys led her to a secluded arbor, vines heavy with late blooms. "Here, miss, peaceful, usually." A rustle in the bushes. Then a figure lunged, gloved hands clamping a cord around Gladys's neck. She struggled, gasping as Miss Marple cried out. The attacker, masked in a balaclava, tightened a noose. Gladys clawed at it, her vision spotting. Miss Marple grabbed a nearby rake, jabbing at the assailant's legs. He yelped, releasing Gladys and fleeing into the undergrowth. Gladys collapsed, wheezing. A clothespin bizarrely clipped to her nose, mocking the rhyme's pecked-off beak. Help arrived. Lance and Percival, drawn by the shouts, pursued the shadow but lost him in the woods. Neil examined Gladys in the infirmary, Quimper administering oxygen. "Strangulation attempt," Quimper confirmed. "Cord left bruises, but she'll recover." The clothespin baffled them. "Sadistic," Neil muttered. Miss Marple, unflappable, recalled Gladys's tale. The aunt's death, perhaps linked. A pushed fall, rhymes made hanging out clothes, metaphorical hanging. Deeper digging ensued. Neil wired for records on Rex's sister, suspicious death, inheritance to Rex, whispers of foul play. In the stables, Lance confronted a groom. "Seen strangers lurking?" The groom nodded. "Aye, sir. A chap in tweed asking about the maid. Paid me to look away." Description matched the kitchen shadow. Neil sketched a composite. Sharp features, scarred cheek. Evening brought a seance. Elaine's idea to contact spirits for clues, a whim born of desperation. They gathered in the parlor, candles flickering on a Ouija board borrowed from the attic. Adele? The planchette spelled B-E-W-A-R-E.
E. Skeptical, Percival scoffed. Trickery! But Gladys, pale but present, gasped as it moved to M-A-I-D-S-O-N-G. A chill swept the room. The board shattered, thrown by unseen hands or Lance's sly nudge. Post-seance, Miss Marple eavesdropped on Percival phoning a broker. Sell the stocks quietly, before news breaks. Financial desperation? She noted it. Night fell, the house locked tight. Yet tragedy struck at midnight. Gladys, restless, slipped to the garden for air. In the moonlight, by the sundial, she bent to pick a fallen bloom. A cord whipped around her throat. Same attacker. She fought, nails raking flesh, but strength waned. Her body went limp, strangled, silent. Crump found her at dawn, nose clipped with a pin, body arranged like a discarded doll. Horror gripped the estate. Neil sealed the scene, forensics swarming. Murdered for what she knew, he declared. Miss Marple examined the body discreetly. Scratches on her hands, skin under nails. Test for DNA. Quimper nodded, sampling. Clues mounted. A torn cufflink near the sundial, engraved with "V." Vivian? Elaine confessed. Vivian was Adele's spurned love, but also Rex's sister's paramour. He blamed the family for her death. Neil tracked Vivian, alive, recently in town. Raid on a nearby inn yielded Vivian, scarred cheek, bandaged arm from scratches. I didn't kill the maid, he protested, in custody. Interrogation in the village station. I stalked Adele for revenge, feathers, notes, but murders, no. Alibi for Gladys's death, pub brawl, witnesses. Cleared, but his presence muddied waters. Back at the lodge, Miss Marple uncovered a hidden diary in Gladys's room. Entries on overhearing Rex plotting against rivals, including a mind-elapse cover-up. The maid knew too much, Miss Marple told Neil. Silenced before testifying. A minor accomplice emerged, the groom, bribed by Vivian for access, but innocent of murder. Arrested for aiding, he spilled. Saw Percival arguing with Gladys days ago about stolen docs. Percival confronted, admitted. She found embezzlement docs. I paid her off, not killed. Proof cleared him, alibi solid. With the accomplice jailed, a breath of justice settled. The core killer evaded, but the chapter closed on Gladys's song, her silence a haunting refrain in the rhyme's deadly melody.
Chapter 4. The King's Counting House. The pall of Gladys's murder hung over Yew Tree Lodge like a persistent storm cloud, even as the sun climbed high on the third day, bathing the estate in a deceptive golden hue. The gardens, once a haven of orderly beauty, now felt tainted, their paths patrolled by additional constables, whose boots left imprints in the soft earth. Whispers among the remaining staff, Crump, the butler, his wife the cook, and a handful of day laborers spoke of ghosts and curses, fueling an exodus of lesser help who fled with hastily packed bags. Inspector Neil, his face lined with the fatigue of unbroken vigilance, had transformed the morning room into a makeshift command center. Maps of the grounds pinned to corkboards, timelines scrawled on chalkboards, and stacks of financial documents requisitioned from Rex's safe cluttered the space. Dr. Quimper hovered nearby, analyzing trace evidence from Gladys's nails, skin fragments that yielded no immediate matches but hinted at a perpetrator with calloused hands, perhaps from manual labor. Financials are key now, Neil declared to his sergeant, a burly man named Hay. The rhyme points to the king in his counting house, counting out his money. Rex was the king, his empire the house. But with him gone, the heirs are scrambling. Hay nodded, flipping through ledgers. Percival's been evasive about the books. Embezzlement whispers from the staff.
Across the hall, in the opulent breakfast parlor, with its marble fireplace and crystal chandeliers, the family convened for a tense meal. Silver urns steamed with coffee, but the scones remained untouched. Elaine, her eyes shadowed from sleepless nights, poured shakily for Lance, who lounged with feigned nonchalance, his boots propped on an ottoman. "Percival's late again," Elaine noted, her voice a fragile thread. "Buried in Father's papers, no doubt. He thinks he can salvage the mess alone." Lance swirled his cup, inhaling the aroma. "Salvage? Or cover tracks? Brother dear has always been the bean counter, but beans don't lie, unless cooked." Elaine shot him a reproachful glance. "This isn't the time for puns, Lance. Gladys is dead because she knew something about the family secrets." Before Lance could retort, Percival entered, his suit rumpled, tie askew, a far cry from his usual precision. He clutched a briefcase bulging with files. "Morning. I've been reviewing the accounts. It's worse than I thought. Father's speculations in South American bonds have tanked. We're on the brink." Lance straightened. "Brink of what? Bankruptcy or revelation? You managed the day-to-day. How'd it slip?" Percival slammed the case down. "Slip? Father's whims overrode me. That uranium fiasco? Millions down the drain. And now, with the murders, investors are pulling out." Elaine interjected softly. "Perhaps we sell assets. The London flat, the yacht." Percival's laugh was bitter. "Too late. Creditors are circling like vultures." Unbeknownst to them, Miss Marple had positioned herself in the adjoining sunroom, separated by a half-open door, her knitting needles clicking a rhythmic camouflage. She listened, her mind weaving threads. Finances as motive, the rhyme's counting house a metaphor for greed's lair. Mid-morning brought a visitor. Mr. Billingsley, the family solicitor, a portly man with mutton-chop whiskers and a briefcase of legal tomes. He was ushered into the study, now unsealed, but still echoing Rex's presence with its leather scents and ticking grandfather clock. Neil joined them, along with the family. Billingsley cleared his throat, unfolding the will under the desk lamp's glow. As per Rex's last testament, dated 6 months ago, the estate divides thus: half to Percival as executor, a quarter to Lance on proof of reform, a quarter to Elaine in trust. Adele's portion reverts to the pot, given her demise. Murmurs rippled. Lance whistled. "Proof of reform? What's that mean? Sunday school attendance?" Billingsley adjusted his pince-nez. "Abstinence from gambling, stable employment." Rex was specific. Percival paled. "But the codicil. Father mentioned changes." "Indeed," Billingsley continued. "A recent addendum allocates funds to a charity for African miners, atonement for past exploits, perhaps. Reduces your shares by 10%. Outrage ensued. Percival stood. "Impossible. He'd never." Lance smirked. "Guilty conscience? Those mine collapses weren't accidents, were they?" Billingsley intervened. "Gentlemen, there's more. Discrepancies in the signatures. Possible forgery." Neil's eyes narrowed. "Forgery? By whom?" The solicitor shrugged. "Expert analysis needed, but if proven, the original will stands, favoring Percival heavily." Suspicion thickened the air. Miss Marple, invited as a family friend, observed from a wingback chair. "Such documents," she mused aloud, "like recipes, alter one ingredient and the whole cake falls." Post-reading, Neil pulled Percival aside in the corridor, lined with ancestral portraits glaring down. "Your alibis hold for the deaths, but finances? Embezzlement rumors? Explain." Percival sweated. "Rumors? I borrowed internally, temporary loans to cover shortfalls. Father approved. Proof."
In the safe, vouchers. They retrieved them, yellowed slips, but dates mismatched. "These are backdated," Neely accused. Percival stammered. A clerk's error. Outside, in the carriage house amid scents of hay and oil, Lance tinkered with an old motorcycle, his escape plan, perhaps. Elaine approached, her skirts brushing the straw. "Lance, do you think Percival's involved? The forgeries." He wiped grease from his hands. "Involved? He's neck-deep in denial. But killing? Too cowardly. Still, those bonds, he pushed father into them, knowing the risks." Elaine gasped. "For gain? Or to hide losses? I sniffed around Nairobi contacts. Percival skimmed from shipments." A shadow fell. Crump, eavesdropping. "Sir, lunch is served." Lunch in the conservatory was a strained affair, glass walls amplifying the heat of accusations. Tropical plants loomed, their leaves whispering in the breeze from open vents. Platters of quiche and salad sat cooling as Plok turned to survival. "We liquidate the art collection," Percival proposed. "Rembrandts fetch millions." Lance forked a bite. "And the mines sell to competitors, like that Dubois fellow's syndicate." Elaine frowned. "Dubois? Adele's paramour. He's jailed." "But his partners aren't," Percival snapped. "They've offered generously." Miss Marple, sampling a tart, interjected mildly, "Generosity often masks ulterior motives, like that vicar's nephew who helped with investments, ended in ruin." Neely, dining with them, probed. "This syndicate, ties to Rex's enemies?" Percival hesitated. "Rivals, yes, but business is war." Afternoon investigations deepened. In the basement vaults, Rex's counting house, iron safes held deeds and bonds. Neely, with Quimper, cracked one open. Stacks of cash, but ledgers showed deficits. "Millions missing," Quimper calculated, "siphoned over years." Fingerprints on the safe, Percival's predominant. Confronted in the vault's dim light, Percival crumbled. "All right, I diverted funds to prop up failing ventures, but murders, no." Neely pressed. "Alibis aside, motive fits. Eliminate witnesses." "Witnesses? Father knew, tolerated it. Adele suspected, demanded hush money. Gladys overheard." A clue emerged. A hidden compartment yielded forged bonds. Percival's handwriting. "You're under arrest for fraud," Neely declared, cuffing him. The family watched from the stairs, stunned. Lance whistled. "Brother, the mighty fallen." Elaine wept. "But the killer, still free." Miss Marple nodded. "Fraud unraveled, but the rhyme persists. The Queen's parlor awaits." With Percival carted off, a partial peace descended. The estate sighed in relief, finances laid bare, but the mastermind shadowed. Evening brought reflection. Miss Marple strolled the orchards, apples ripening under twilight skies. Greed's counting house toppled, yet the song plays on.
Chapter 5. The Queen's Deadly Parlor. With Percival Fortescue hauled away in handcuffs for his financial misdeeds, Yew Tree Lodge exhaled a collective breath, though the air remained thick with unresolved dread. The fourth day broke under a sky streaked with crimson, as if the heavens themselves bled warnings. The estate's grandeur now felt hollow, its halls echoing with the ghosts of accusations and alibis. Elaine Fortescue, left to manage the remnants of the household, moved like a specter through the corridors, her once timid demeanor hardened by necessity. Lance, ever the opportunist, had taken to prowling the grounds, his eyes scanning for hidden advantages amid the chaos. Inspector Neely, undeterred by the partial victory, redoubled his efforts. He had commandeered the billiard room as an extension of his operations, cue racks now draped with evidence bags, and the green baize table buried under maps of family connections. Dr. Quimper, his forensic ally, pored over slides and samples, muttering about elusive traces that defied easy explanation. "The fraud explains motives, but not the method," Neely confided to Quimper over steaming mugs of tea in the early light. "The rhyme's a signature, personal, vindictive. We've unraveled the counting house, but the Queen's parlor looms. Bread and honey, pecked noses, it's all tied to some buried vendetta." Quimper adjusted his spectacles, peering at a report. "Honey, perhaps literal. Adele's tea had bergamot notes, but no honey. Wait, lab addendum. Traces of bee venom in her bloodstream, masked by cyanide. Not fatal alone, but a clue." Neely's brow furrowed. "Bee venom? Yew Tree has apiaries in the far orchard. Someone harvesting malice." Outside, Miss Marple ventured into those very orchards, her stout shoes crunching fallen leaves as she inspected the hives. The bees hummed an industrious symphony, oblivious to human intrigues. She was joined unexpectedly by Crump, the butler, who carried a veiled hat and smoker, tools of his occasional beekeeping hobby. "Miss Marple," he greeted gruffly, puffing smoke to calm the swarm. "Curious place for a stroll. These hives were Rex's pride, imported from Italy. Honey for the table, venom for, well, experiments," he said. She tilted her head, observing a worker bee alight on a flower. "Experiments? Do tell, Mr. Crump. In my village, beekeepers often know more than they let on, like old Mr. Humble, who uncovered a poaching ring through hive patterns." Crump hesitated, then relented. "Rex dabbled in pharmaceuticals, thought bee venom could cure his aches. But lately jars went missing. I blamed Gladys, rest her soul, but she swore innocence." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. Missing jars and Adele's tea, perhaps not blackbirds, but bees in the honey. The rhyme twists, queen in the parlor, supping sweetly, yet stung fatally. Back indoors, Elaine hosted a subdued brunch in the winter garden, a glass-enclosed haven bursting with exotic ferns and orchids. The table groaned under platters of fresh bread, clotted cream, and golden honey from the hives. Ironic, given the suspicions. Lance arrived fashionably late, his shirt sleeves rolled up, revealing sun-bronzed arms from his African sojourns. "Elaine, darling sister-in-law, you've outdone yourself," he quipped, slathering honey on toast. "Though, with Percival in the clink, who's footing the bill? Our fortunes are as sticky as this spread." Elaine's lips thinned. "Mind your tongue, Lance. We're not out of the woods. The inspector hints at more arrests." Lance leaned back, crunching his bite. "More? Percival's the scapegoat, but I smell a rat or a bee. Father's old partners are circling, offering buyouts. One in particular, Elias Crow, from the Blackbird Mines debacle." Elaine paused her fork. "Crow, the one Rex ruined? He sent condolences yesterday, oddly timed." Unseen, Miss Marple lingered by a potted palm, her presence masked by foliage. She noted Lance's casual mention, filing it away like a pressed flower. Midday brought a breakthrough in the laboratory annex, a converted shed where Quimper worked. Neely burst in, waving a telegram. Crow's background, bankrupt by Rex's maneuvers, lost everything, including a daughter to illness, untreated due to poverty. And get this, Crow's childhood home burned down,
arson suspected, tied to a nursery rhyme prank gone wrong. Quimper looked up from his microscope. Prank? Involving sixpence and rye fields? Precisely, Neely confirmed. Crow was the maid in a cruel schoolyard game, nose-blooded in a mock pecking, vowed revenge on the ringleader, young Rex Fortescue.
The pieces clicked. Miss Marple, informed by a discreet note from Neely, pondered in her guest suite, a cozy room with floral wallpaper and a writing desk. She penned notes. Rye as childhood taunt, blackbirds symbolizing lost miners, honey laced with venom for the Queen Adele, Maid Gladys silenced for witnessing Crow's infiltration. Afternoon unfolded with a surprise visit, Elias Crow himself, arriving in a sleek motor car, his frame gaunt, eyes burning with suppressed fire. Dressed in somber tweeds, he requested audience in the receiving room, a space of gilt mirrors and satin settees. "Inspector," Crow began, his voice gravelly as mine shafts, "I've come to offer assistance. Rex and I had history, bitter, yes, but his death pains me. Perhaps my records aid your inquiry." Neely, flanked by a constable, accepted a dossier. "Generous, Mr. Crow, but why now?" Crow's smile was thin. "Closure. And business. I'm interested in acquiring the mines. Fair price, of course." Lance, eavesdropping from the hall, burst in. "Acquire? Over my dead body! You bled Father dry once, won't happen again." Crow turned, unflinching. "Young Fortescue, your father's sins cast long shadows. Learn from them." Elaine, drawn by voices, mediated. "Gentlemen, please. Mr. Crow, join us for tea in the parlor. Civil discourse might heal wounds." The parlor, an elegant chamber of rosewood furniture, Persian rugs, and a roaring hearth, became the stage. Tea was served, delicate cups, scones, and a pot of honeyed brew. Miss Marple accepted an invitation, seating herself unobtrusively by the window, overlooking twilight gardens. As they sipped, tension simmered. Crow reminisced. "Rex and I were boys together, wild games in the fields. That rhyme, 'Sing a song of sixpence,' we acted it out, but it turned sour. I was the butt of jokes, left scarred." Lance probed. "Scarred how? Enough for murder?" Crow's cup rattled. "Murder? Preposterous! I was in London during the incidents. Alibis galore." Neely interjected. "Alibis we've checked. Porous. And your expertise in poisons, from mining chemicals." Crow stiffened. "Accusations! I came in good faith." Miss Marple cleared her throat softly. "Faith, Mr. Crow, like honey, sweet but sometimes hiding stings. Your daughter. Tragic loss. Blamed on Rex's ruthlessness." Crow's facade cracked. "She needed medicine. Denied because Rex undercut my firm. Yes, I harbored grudge. But killing? No." The gathering dispersed uneasily, Crow departing with promises of further documents. But Miss Marple lingered, examining the honeypot. "A faint bitterness," she murmured to Neely privately. "Test it. Venom, perhaps." Lab results confirmed. Laced but diluted. A warning, not lethal. Evening descended, the lodge aglow with lamps. Neely assembled the survivors in the parlor once more, this time formally. Chairs arranged in a circle, fire crackling, shadows playing on walls adorned with family crests. "Elaine, Lance, Crump, sit," Neely commanded. Miss Marple took a seat, her knitting bag at her feet. "We've pieced the puzzle. The killer's an outsider, yes, but with inside help. Elias Crow." Lance scoffed. "We suspected, but proof?" Miss Marple spoke, her voice steady. "Proof in patterns, dear. The rhyme wasn't random, rooted in childhood trauma. Crow as a boy was humiliated by Rex in a game mimicking the verse. Pocket rye thrown at him, blackbird masks pecking, honey smeared with bees. He vowed revenge, waiting decades. Elaine gasped. But how connect to us? Through Gladys, Miss Marple continued. She was Crow's niece, placed here as a spy. Her past connection to Rex's sister? A fabrication to infiltrate. She supplied intel but grew conflicted, hence her silencing. Neely nodded. DNA from her nails matches Crow, scratched in struggle. Lance leaned forward. And Adele, the tea? Queen in the parlor, Miss Marple explained. Adele, Rex's queen, poisoned with cyanide but laced with bee venom, a personal touch, echoing Crow's boyhood sting. The blackbirds? Miners lost in the collapse Crow blamed on Rex. 24 souls baked in the Earth's pie. Crump shifted uncomfortably. And the rye? First taunt, rye fields where the prank occurred, stuffed in Rex's pocket as signature. Elaine whispered, Percival's fraud? A diversion, Neely said. Crow forged documents to implicate him, sowing chaos. A knock echoed. The constable escorting Crow back, summoned under pretense. Mr. Crow, Neely announced, you're under arrest. Crow sneered. On what grounds? Miss Marple rose. On the grounds of vengeance unchecked. Your grudge festered, twisted the rhyme into weapon. Gladys's diary, hidden in the hives, details your instructions. She wavered, you struck. Crow's eyes blazed. Rex destroyed me, my family. The rhyme was his mockery. I made it his epitaph. Confession tumbled. Infiltration via Gladys. Poisons smuggled. Alibis faked with bribes. Gasps filled the room as constables cuffed him. Justice swift. Crow led away. The parlor fell silent, fire dying to embers. Elaine sighed. It's over. Lance nodded. Peace at last. Miss Marple gathered her things. Human nature, dears, ever the same, like my village tales but grander scale. She slipped out into the night, curiosity quenched, leaving the Fortescues to rebuild from the ashes, a satisfying close, vendettas laid to rest.